Oh, yes. This is the Hardcore Marketing Show. I'm Casey Cheshire, your host for this epic journey. And today's show, sponsored by Cheshire Impact, on a mission to help people maximize their use of Pardot and Salesforce. CheshireImpact.com. Bam. That's it. I just hit the record button. We are cranking. My guest today, I'm excited about this one. He is, decades of sales and sales leadership experience, entrepreneur, writer, business leader, but has experience understanding of the sales and marketing side. So we're going to get into that today, better understanding sales, how we can better support them in the marketing world and just all around be better revenue drivers in our companies. Founder and president at SalesRoads, David Kreiger. Welcome to the show.
Great to be here, Casey. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, man, this is exciting. You've been doing this for a long time.
I have. SalesRoads is going on its 13th year. So that's crazy. Maybe 15 years since I was planning it for 2 years because I'm a planner, which maybe we'll talk about. But yeah. And
your kid's a teenager now, you know?
No, and he's getting a little unruly here. So
yeah, they usually do around 13, don't they? Companies they get crazy. Mine's not a toddler. Mine's in primary school. You know.
Okay. Very nice. It's good. Those are good years. Those are fond memories of those years.
Companies still snuggle you at those points.
That's right.
So hey, let me. This is our sales leadership series. I want to pass you this thing and we'll get this show started. All right, it's kind of heavy for me, but you're in sales, so I know you got this. Okay.
Oh my gosh, I'm
Thor's hammer. You got it? You want to grab it?
Let me grab it.
There you go. Okay.
Oh, there we go.
Great. Okay, so take Thor's hammer and smash for me some kind of myth, bogus strategy, misconception. Just set the record straight once and for all.
Yeah. So one thing I think is important, and actually, I had a conversation with an old friend of mine who I knew when I was 13, who's a marketer, just a few days ago, and he was talking about how he could never be in sales. It just more behind the scenes, more quiet type, and whatnot. But I'll tell you, this guy is one-on-one is so personal. He's interested in people, right? And I think so many people, and I think maybe a lot of marketers, have this feeling that like sales is all about the gift of the gab and being able to go out and be the life of the party and being able to like call attention to yourself and just always have the next best thing to say and be able to make people laugh and all that type of stuff. But it's really just not about that.
Not Mr. Popular in high school kind of thing. Hey, how you doing? Yeah,
exactly.
So
right?
Cool.
right. Exactly. Yeah. They're the people you think are going to be the best and grow up to be salespeople and whatnot. But I definitely wasn't that, and I still am not today. I mean, I am definitely much more introverted than I am extroverted. And a lot of people think, oh yeah, 100%. I mean, this whole quarantine thing, I didn't come up with it, but I read on Twitter that somebody said that they were practicing social distancing their entire life. It felt like that spoke to me, and my whole life is about sales.
You're doing great, man. You're like, oh, good. Now I have an excuse not to talk to people.
That's right. I could just stay in my home and hang out and just read books and just do my own thing. So. But, I do, and I think it maybe holds people back either from going into sales or maybe taking part in the sales process and things like that, because sales isn't about that, that gregarious person who's just always talking and always being interesting and has the next best story to tell. It's actually, in my opinion, it's the opposite. It's the person like my friend who I was talking about who's interested in the people that they're talking to and asking them the questions and asking and just want to listen and remembers what they say. That person who you described, Casey, in high school didn't probably remember what people said to them. And, totally. It was all about them. Right. But the best, I mean, we've all been through sales process. The best salespeople are those that are listening to us, hearing us, coming up with new ideas, thinking about things. And if you think about it, that is the introvert skill, or at least the person who has that type of propensity to really listen to people and think about people and try to solve their problems and care about people. And so I do think that that is a huge myth, and I think it's detrimental because I think I'm biased, right? But I think sales is such an amazing profession in the sense that really we're trying to help solve people's problems and trying to bring new solutions and help them with their businesses or whatever it might be. And that's an awesome career. And if you are interested in solving people's problems and learning about people and whatnot, it's a great career and it can create a lot of value for people. And so I think it's an important myth for people really just to realize, it's not true. It's actually in many ways counterproductive. And if you are more of that introverted personality, in many ways, you're going to crush it in sales.
Interesting, because I know we've got all these kind of movies that come out and are like, oh, this is how it really is. I keep seeing Leonardo DiCaprio's face when he's Wolf of Wall Street laughing like like I don't even remember any of my last prospects. I'm just closing deals. They're all suckers,
Right.
And we're
And
saying
how did
that's
that end for him? Right?
What's that?
How did that end for him?
I didn't get to the end of the movie. I literally fell asleep. Like, it was just because it was more of the same. It was like, okay, more of the same. It was fun for a while. I think I checked out shortly after he pushed the helicopter off the ship. I mean, that was cool, I guess,
Right.
unless you wanted a helicopter later. But yeah, how did it end for him?
Jail.
Jail. Got it.
But I mean, he's made a comeback because he's kind of learned the error of his ways. But I think that's a great story, anecdote, Casey, because like that's exactly. I mean, he wasn't in it for them. He wasn't selling to like try to help people out. He was looking to like take people's retirement funds away, right? And who wants to do that? And at the end of the day, oftentimes it catches up to you, right? And he's worse off for it. I mean, because he's got an interesting story now. He's kind of learned from it and try to like do better things and whatnot. But it's not a long-term sustainable strategy because at the end of the day, you're not helping people. And it's not a good way to sell. So
yeah, no one wants to be sold to, it just feels icky. It's why like I dreaded going to the car dealership and just like, oh God, I brought the missus with me. She was my secret negotiator. They thought I was gonna be the tough one. I'm like, no, you haven't met her yet, man. Like, I'm gonna go get some coffee. I'll let you guys chat.
That's awesome.
But yeah, so why do we have this misconception? Is it the movies? Is it, I mean, people in sales can be like that, or like, why is this such a myth that needs to be understood?
It's a good question. I'm not 100% sure, but here's a few maybe thoughts. One is that I think those people do generate the most attention, right? And so we don't see that person at the side of the trade show who's having that meaningful conversation, with a CMO or a CRO. It's that person who's in the big group and calling and telling all these stories and is getting all the attention. But at the end of the day, listen, I'm sure they'll sell some stuff, but they're not, they're not getting the meaningful information that's going to actually allow them to understand who in that group needs their product or service and how they can help them, right? So I think a lot of it is that they're good at generating attention, they're good at generating buzz, and the folks who are the quieter ones, they don't call attention to themselves, but they're getting things done in the background, and so that might be a big reason for it. I also think I think that you brought up these movies. If Leonardo DiCaprio was an introvert, right, and The Wolf of Wall Street was an introvert, it wouldn't make for a great movie, right? So how many movies are made about that rock star salesperson?
Okay, what would that be like? What would that be like if The Wolf of Wall Street was an introvert? How would that go down, do you think?
So how's your family doing today? And like asking random questions over the phone instead of wheeling and dealing and whatnot. So
how's Gerald? How's Gerald? Is his knee feeling better?
Right. Is Bernard doing well? Is he taking all his meds today? No, driving the Nissan instead of driving a helicopter.
Taking the subway, taking the bus.
There we go.
Not the bus. Too many people.
Right. So I think the media, not the media, but the Hollywood glamorizes it, right? It's interesting. Glenn Ross, I mean, right, everybody knows that movie, and it makes for amazing cinema, right, or amazing plays. But introverts are just not that fun, not that interesting. Or they're not that they're not that fun, because but they're not. It doesn't have that shine.
Well, they're fun, but like to your
in a
point,
different way.
they're fun to hang out with maybe, but I don't think it's like, I don't think you trust your child with that kind of a person, or, you know, like to babysit them, or yeah, or like your to your point, your retirement account, you know, you're like, oh, fun to hang out with at a party,
Right.
but yeah, no, I'm gonna go with this other person who is actually listening to me.
Right.
Do you think marketing could learn a lesson from that? Because it sounds like there's this sort of core principle underneath it around listening and caring.
Yeah, I mean, I think the best marketers definitely uh, do this, and there could be a lesson for those who don't. And I think it is, one of the things I've definitely collaborated with marketing, and part of what our service also provides in as an ancillary benefit is you want to talk to your prospects, right? You don't want to just
Yeah,
like think about what you think they're going to want. And I think consumer marketing a lot of times does this even better than B2B marketing, because you have more around focus groups and all that type of stuff. But B2B marketing is so important to really just reach out both to your current customers but to prospects, and think about, this is who I think my ICP is. This is this buyer persona, this buyer persona. Oh, and marketers should just call them and have a conversation and talk about it. But a lot of times, maybe it's the introvert personnel, or maybe we think that's sales role or whatnot. But I think it's really important to have those conversations and just ask those questions and listen to them, so that you make sure that you're delivering the type of content and messaging that really resonates with them.
yeah, it's such a weird thing to try to use surveys to get to know people better, right? It's almost like the introvert went too far and said, "Here, fill out my survey," and it's like, just maybe just a little quick phone call. You're gonna pick up on
Yeah.
some things, and it's the question after the question. It's that follow up.
Yes.
Why does this matter to you? And those kind of things. I think it's so much. You can't have a radio button for every option, and you're just gonna bias your results and all that. It's
Yes.
crazy.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think that's so true. The question after the question, I mean, how can you predict for that? Something is going to be interesting to you, and you got to ask and probe about that. And you can't predict that in a survey. Otherwise, you got, a crazy, crazy survey that you're putting together.
Right. No matter what they answer, oh, that's interesting. Tell me more about that. You just have it
Right.
built in every time.
Right. That's true. You could do that.
It'll turn that survey into like a counseling session. Oh, how did that make you feel?
Right.
You went on G2 Crowd. How did that make you feel? Um, what kind of things are you seeing between sales and marketing that, either alignment issues or, things that get in the way of them working together?
Yeah, and I think a lot of companies have started to really address this.
Yeah.
I know you had Daryl Prale on recently, who's a
You know
great
Daryl?
guy. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
He's
Daryl's
a great
great.
dude though, huh? He's just
He
like a
is.
stand-up guy,
He's
even as
very
a
interesting.
Canadian.
Oh, what's that?
Even as a Canadian, he's just
Yeah, we'll have to let him off the
we
hook
love
for
him.
that. Yeah, no, he's great. He's got great energy. He's got great marketing skills, great sales skills. So I think he's got great content that they put out there at Vanilla
Right.
Soft. We're a partner of theirs. We love,
That's cool.
so it's great. And
For the
he
record, I
was
do love Canadians too. I just like making fun of Daryl.
right.
Inside joke. Go ahead. You were chatting with him.
Well, he was just promoted to CRO, and I think a lot
Yeah.
of companies are really thinking about it in that way, because when you do have these two silos of VP of marketing and VP of sales, it's harder to bridge that gap. And so I think a
Yeah.
lot of companies are creating that role, like like they did for Daryl, where it reports into one person who really gets it and is responsible, and you don't have the finger pointing and all that type of stuff, but also really have a coherent strategy between the two, because marketing on its own can work, and sales on its own can work, but when you put it together and you make it a partnership that is two-way, giving information back and forth, leveraging insights from both sides, it's really a beautiful thing. So I do think it is important to think about it in that way, either have that position or really make sure there's a way that those two are working together.
Yeah. And do you ever see like what kind of ways do salespeople think of marketing wrong? Like, I know we have our misconceptions on the marketing side, but do you ever what kind of ways do sales? How are they viewing us the right way, the wrong way, or that kind of thing?
Yeah. So I think one is so, I think it's important to have, regular conversations with marketing and sales, because I
Yeah.
think, what you're hearing on the phone might be very different than what marketing thinks is the reality on the ground. And so I think, if you don't feed some of that information into marketing, you're not going to be able to get what you need. And if there are certain pain points or certain types of content that you need as you're prospecting in to cold prospects, or as you're trying to nurture different folks through your funnel, you need to go and talk to marketing and make sure that they're aligned around getting those types of things for you. So, I don't know if that's thinking about it necessarily wrong or not, but I just think that communication is so important. Otherwise, marketing can spend so much time and attention on an ebook that really your your prospects just don't care about. You just, it's not
Yeah.
something that's on their mind.
That happens a lot.
A lot, a lot.
We just spent 3 months on this ebook, and you're like, "Mm, okay. And then no
Yeah,
one sends it to anyone.
right. Because then, yeah, it could be even counterproductive, because it's all it makes you seem out of touch. So, I think it's really important, and I do think, in this day and age, you know, a lot of buyers, as we all know, are going online. They're finding a lot of information, and so if marketing doesn't get that information from sales, they're just shooting in the dark, and they're missing really a resource that's right there within their own company. I would say it's much more important to have those conversations and really pick your salespeople's brains than to have an internal marketing meeting and come up with ideas. So combine them, right? Bring everybody
Yeah.
together. So
Smart. Combining those, right? Instead of trying to think of things in a silo. I see the tech too, right? Tech can often, like, you got to connect your marketing automation with
yeah.
your CRM. You don't want to abuse it, on the sales side or the marketing side. You see violations of that all over the place.
Yeah, I mean, that's true, and I mean that's another thing that we have definitely seen. And the tools that are out there are fantastic. When I started the company, we didn't have, there was some marketing automation, but there's definitely no sales, cadence technology. Outreach didn't come on the scene until a few years ago, and it's sales lofts, and they're amazing. They're amazing tools. Um, but one thing we've seen with those is, that they are, salespeople can sometimes hide behind them, right? And they look at those tools and they make them um, sort of their own little Marketo, or their HubSpot, or their Mailchimp, and they just are blasting people out, and they're not leveraging the tools in the way that they really should. And
Mm-hmm.
that's by, like, maybe your marketing's come up with a few emails for you, but you customize them and you really do a little bit of research and whatnot. But if you just have marketing load you up with a few templated emails and you just blast it out, and you're looking for somebody to reply before you pick up the phone, I'll be honest, marketing can just replace you, right? With just, Pardot, or, anything like that. And so,
Yeah.
it's really making sure that the two are working together in order to have that amazing, success that you can with these tools. But when used wrong, in some ways, I think a lot of sales teams can hurt their productivity.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, if all you're doing is just blasting out an email, just like marketing's doing, it's like, what are you doing? Why,
Right.
why are we,
Why?
why are you here? And why are we paying you commission on everything?
Exactly, right? We could just do that with a click of a button,
Let's
and we
pay
don't need
Pardot
you to.
commission.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, man. I know you do a lot of work with the inside. I mean, that is inside sales, right? That's your bread and
Mhm.
butter?
Yeah,
It,
yeah.
what's the best way to approach that? Like, I kind of come at it from a lot of marketing experience. I've done some sales work, not on, teams per se, but just in smaller companies and being a hustler kind of thing, selling tuxedos. So no inside sales team there. But what should I know about inside sales? Are there some core principles to it? And then, who owns it? What role should it play? How does it tie into marketing? All that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So first of all, with inside sales is an interesting term too, because in some ways, over the course of 2020, all sales has become inside sales, at least for now, right? So, from a technical standpoint, inside sales is really just folks who are staying in the office, making calls, just doing Zoom meetings, things like that. They don't travel and go out. And so it's been an interesting year, and it will actually be interesting to see what does happen in 2021, because over since I started the company, in 2007, um, inside sales was always the stepchild to outside sales or field sales, and the amount of quota was much less for inside sales than outside sales. All the big deals were closed by outside sales, right? They would
Interesting.
go on,
Yeah.
and what we've seen over the past 13 years is that inside sales has continued to increase as far as the amount of quota, the amount of budget that was being put in. Outside sales as a proportion has decreased, but still, I believe, and I don't remember the exact numbers, before 2020, outside sales still had more quota than inside sales. But even before all this happened, there was a lot of benefits to inside sales, right?
Yeah.
You didn't have all the travel costs, right? You in in some ways are more efficient because you're not getting on planes. You just can go from meeting to meeting just by clicking a button and going on Zoom.
It's
And
true.
then also we've seen the buyer change, right? Back in the day, um, you know, a lot of buyers wanted to be taken out to fancy dinners and go on golf outings and things like that. And there still was a place for that and still will be a place for that. But buyers have become a lot more busy. And a lot of times they don't want to spend 4 hours with with a salesperson. They want to get the information. They want to hear from them. They want to know how their business can improve. And then they need to move on to the next thing. And inside sales is better equipped for that. And some buyers would prefer to have a Zoom meeting than have someone in their office that they feel this feeling like they've got to kind of entertain them too, right? Because they've come out to
Right.
visit them. So we've seen this trajectory happen over the past 13 years. And 2020 is a very interesting inflection point because this year everything had to be, inside.
Inside.
And
Yeah.
right. And so what I'm curious to see what happens next year, and how much stays inside, and how much goes outside. So that being said, that's kind of the lay of the land of inside sales. Now we at SalesRoads deal with one portion of inside sales. So inside sales can be the AEs as long as they're just not traveling. They're doing everything over their computer. There's the other part which is just the prospecting, and just
Yeah.
doing finding new appointments and new opportunities for AEs, and that's what we really do specialize in inside sales. So there's kind of a few different portions.
Gotcha. Now I want to talk about get more into this, but the idea that the buyer has changed, right? The buyer's changed, don't necessarily want to be wined and dined or don't have time for this or that, or it can be kind of awkward, like, okay, we're sitting in boardrooms and you brought me a basket of treats, I hope. By the way, one time I brought or someone on our team, Ari, she brought in these like gourmet donuts in Chicago. In like,
Okay.
imagine that 2 days prior, I just like committed, I'm gonna go low carb for the next month or so. And I'm like, and I had to stare at these donuts for this entire sales meeting. It was
A
hard.
little
It was hard. And
awkward,
then they're
yeah.
like, wow, this one's maple. Wow, this one's this. I'm like, oh my gosh. Ironic.
That's
But
awesome.
you're right. Sometimes the buyers are shifting to where let's just bang this out, guys. Let's just get on a call. Show me what I want to see. Answer my questions. And do you think that maybe the change in from that extrovert to the introvert has changed with this? Like, because you're right,
That's
the person
interesting.
on the phone is a good listener versus the good talker. Like you put the used car salesman on a Zoom call and you're just like, well, get out of here. Like, get off my computer. Whereas maybe they were more comfortable being out and about with their nice suit and, doing the dinner thing, and they know what to order and what bottle of wine to order. So like they were better equipped for that outside sales kind of mentality.
I think you're right. I think that's a really good point. I think that the way that this has shifted has made it easier, and introverts like myself more effective,
Yeah.
with buyers, because that's what they want. They don't want somebody talking their ear off necessarily for a half hour and telling this funny story. They've got so many other things they've got to do, right? It's
Yeah.
great to laugh, but not, I don't have time for it right now. So I
Right.
think you're right. I think that the shift I still would argue even before that, that type of mentality of being the good listener and asking questions and things like that paid more dividends than people thought. But I think it maybe has put it on steroids, that the inside sales type of thing where you've got an hour with somebody, or maybe 2 hours when you're doing a real deep demo or whatnot, versus entertaining them all night, definitely favors the introvert over the extrovert.
Yeah, I remember sometimes we'd have partners ask us to do like an executive dinner with them, bring in some customers, do an executive dinner, and and I always put my foot down and say like, if we can present, like if we can teach some people something, great.
Yeah.
If it's just our name next to the fillet, like I'm not interested. It's just
Right.
because I would get so much more with having a conversation where we can like learn and listen than just present. And so many people go to these dinners and they just get presented, like they just get pitched to the whole
Right.
time, and they should be asking them questions instead,
Yeah. 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 Just have a small dinner, small intimate thing where you can really talk to them and really understand them, and understand what their needs are, what their goals are for that year. I mean, so much more effective than just telling them how great you are and how you think you can help them.
Yeah. How another question about transition. How have you worked with any companies that are transitioning from, say, the smaller deals and the smaller company sizes that they serve to the larger? It's almost like everyone's dream to like serve the larger deals and the larger companies, and more cash in per deal, and then less of the little ones to try to put out fires for. Like they're trying to grow up. I don't know if there's a term for that. But have you dealt with that in any kind of transitions that sales has to make?
So, not necessarily like enterprise versus smaller companies, though
Yeah.
we do have clients that will have sort of an enterprise, like we'll put together an enterprise TAM. Those would be, we'll spend a little bit more time on those and do a little bit more research, because obviously the value is higher.
Hmm.
But so yeah, I think that's been somewhat consistent. I'm not sure if I see any particular trends with our clients. What we definitely have seen, or part of what we think is really important, and also is important good sales and marketing alignment, is really making sure that people are targeted in who they're going after, and test different markets. So we really do try to work with our clients on figuring out who their ICP is. And it's amazing, we all think it's sort of table stakes, but a lot of companies, and it's tough to really understand who your ICP is, to test whether that really is your ICP, and why that is, and validate it, and then pivot a little bit if it isn't. So those are some of the things that we've definitely seen companies trying to do, to be more targeted and more effective with both their sales and marketing.
That's a great topic. ICP, ideal customer profile.
Yeah,
Profile.
ideal customer profile. Yep.
What's the magic? What's your secret sauce to figuring that out? Because I agree, and it seems to be the background in a lot of things, even like ABM and other target. Well, hey, you just need to know who you're going after. But like, yeah, everyone can say that, but man, when you're looking at a list and you're like, I'd kind of like to work with all these companies. How do you choose?
Yeah. Yeah. So first of all, you do need to have a little bit of a discipline and know going in that it is better to choose, right? Especially for smaller companies, unless you're you're Google or Zoom or any of these companies with huge markets and huge budgets to be able to address those markets. It's much better to really figure out who you can service well, and turn away the rest, or at least not proactively go after them, because the messaging and how you can service them is very different, and you can only be so good and so relevant in a few different ways. So first is, I think, Casey, to your point, is having that discipline, because it's tough, right?
It is.
A lot of times people are like, I just want to service my whole market. Why do I want to turn
Call
things away?
everybody.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. I want to have as many clients as possible, right?
Yeah.
But going niche, is very effective. I mean, there's that mantra, if you chase two rabbits, you catch none, right? So
Mm.
figuring out, making sure you're focused. And then as far as the methodology, it's tough, and I think it's a few different steps that we recommend and do. Is one, first trying to figure out, take a look at your current client list and figuring out who you think are your best clients, right? And then call them up and have deep conversations with them to really understand, who they are and what it is that you were able to do for them that created value at the organization, and then try to bring them back to what was the thing that happened when you first started looking for a company like ours. What was that impetus? What happened at the company? What happened in your life? Whatever it was, where you started looking for companies like ours, and try to take them back so you can get into their mindset there, and then do a few of the interviews, and then just try to keep on reading over and try to find some similarities. Where are there reasons similar, and where what is different about them? And a lot of times it's some of those soft things that really make the difference, and really are the catalyst for figuring out who your ICP is. And then once you've done that, try to create a list, and then reach out to them and see if your value prop is resonating with those folks, and validate it, and keep on testing and keep on testing and keep on pivoting.
There's a lot of great stuff, and one of the key parts here is that communication we talked about earlier, actually talking to them. You kind of have to get over that shyness or whatever made you go marketing and not sales in the first place, to say like, well, customers can be great, especially your best ones. The very first step you mentioned was like your best clients, your best customers. So they're not going to be nearly as scary as your worst customers. If you don't want to talk to them, I understand. We're not focusing on them. We're focusing on your best customers, and then having a conversation with them. They're probably remarkable people. You can learn a lot from them.
Yeah, 100%.
Man, where is this going? We talk about the transition from outside sales to inside sales. You hinted at like, who knows what comes after COVID, but like, let's say it's next year, things are opening up. Well, they already are now, but like full swing next year, we're starting to see some conferences maybe going. What happens to sales? What is anything change? If you were to predict, put your Oracle hat on and start predicting wild things, and you'll have it on record here in a podcast. So if you're right, you can promote this podcast to everyone.
Right.
If you're wrong,
we just hide it in the.
We'll just do another episode and be like, oh,
there we go. Dub over my mouth. I'll do a dub over.
Right.
That sounds like a good plan. So now that I'm speaking, nobody knows whether what I'm saying right now is the real thing if they're listening to it a year from now. So, or the thing that we dubbed over to make sure that what I said was
dub
correct.
Over. Yeah. Totally.
Yeah. So I really do think that, going back to sort of the trend line that we saw, I think actually without 2020, inside sales was going to surpass field sales and outside sales. And I just think, this was a catalyst to make it happen faster. But I just think that the way, again, you have to sell the way that buyers want. And I think buyers more and more are not wanting this entailed type of thing. A lot of times, we've seen those facts where they're actually doing most of the research before they even talk to sales, right?
Yeah.
And self-servicing and whatnot. And so the salesperson really is coming in later in the sales cycle, and in a different way. And I think that inside sales really can handle as well, or if better, the needs of those buyers than somebody in field sales. And then with the amount of technology that's out there to support, what you're doing on an inside sales basis. I mean, the best example is LinkedIn, right? Now, the amount of information that you can just get at your fingertips through LinkedIn, but Zoom is another, a great example. I mean, just a few years ago, or really even just a few months ago, people weren't really talking on Zoom. And I know it gets a bad rap. People are kind of like tired, have Zoom fatigue and whatnot. But listen, when you're having a meaningful conversation late in the sales cycle, it is just an amazing platform, both
Yeah.
to be able to easily relate to somebody, look them eye to eye, but also to be able to present and show them and demo the software that you're looking to demo. So it just feels to me that inside sales is the way that people are going to be building their sales team. And though it was the stepchild of outside and field side sales, it will be in some ways the reverse, right? The inside sales is going to be the mastermind behind everything. And when needed, I will deploy a field salesperson, and at the command of inside sales. And so I think that it's really going to be reversed within companies, where quota will be much more heavily on inside sales. Hopefully salaries and commissions will be commensurate with that, because of just the productivity that I think an inside sales rep can have versus a field sales rep. And so that's really where I do see sales going into the future.
Yeah, the productivity is such a key point with that. And, I had a question. You work with a lot of people on sales, even taking over their sales. If you had to pick like 3 things people get wrong when you first start working with them that you're like quick to fix or replace or whatever, would you have any answer for that? Like, are there some common things that people just, whether it's a misconception or they just bad practice, where their sales is set up in a certain way that's wrong, or they're doing things a certain way?
Yeah. So one is not being targeted. We've talked a little bit
Gotcha.
about
Yep.
that, and with, especially with proactive prospecting, really being very careful about who you're reaching out to and who's your target market. And a lot of times companies, like we've talked about, just, are going after everybody, but really it's so important to be able to be selective. I mean, for instance, let's say you have this is such an easy example, but you have a SaaS solution that integrates only with Salesforce. Well, make sure that you're using resources that give you an indication as to whether those prospects are using Salesforce or not. And there's a lot of great resources to do that. I mean, it's pretty simple, but a lot of companies just don't even
Yeah, I could
do
see
that.
you burning a bunch of cycles talking to people. This sounds great. We've got dynamics. And you're like,
Right.
oh, I just spent a
Exactly.
month selling this person and they don't have the tool. Yeah.
Exactly. So, I mean, that's a pretty obvious example, but I think a lot of companies, don't get that right. The other thing is, I think a lot of companies do think, both internally and externally, that you just put it together and it starts to work, right? But this is it's such a process, right? Both with making sure you've got the right people in the position, making sure you've got the right strategy, and then coaching and iterating that strategy. And so one of the things that we really work with our clients on is that it takes some time, right? It takes time to really iterate and figure out whether you've got the right strategy, and you need to invest in coaching your reps. You can't just hire these all-star, what you think are all-star reps, and say go out and make calls or go out and close deals. It very rarely will work. You need to have an infrastructure in place that has some good training, has some good coaching, and then can really iterate. And a lot of times companies, they might even believe and know that that's the case, but they don't have the discipline, the time, the resources to put that infrastructure in place. And otherwise, you're just rolling the dice with your sales team, and more often than not, it's not, you're not going to hit.
Not gonna hit. Yeah.
And so really putting that coaching infrastructure in place, which also, going back to the inside sales thing, one thing I didn't mention is, with outside sales and field sales, you in order to really coach your field reps, you have to do ride-alongs, right? And it's much harder to do that. Whereas with inside sales, gosh, I mean, you can listen to calls. There's such great technology with Exec Vision and Gong, and to be able to really understand what's going on and be able to coach. And it's just easier to do it. It's so important, to coach, the lower performers, but also your top performers, right? Sometimes a lot of people don't coach their top performers because they're like, oh, they're hitting quota every day. But sometimes they might be doing one little thing that would allow them to double their performance.
Right.
And you need to really make sure that you're coaching everybody.
Man, powerful stuff. Who are you? How do you know all these things? Can you take us back in time to like little David? Did you always know you're going to be in sales growing up? And it sounds like you weren't that the guy. Neither was I. That was like the natural field salesperson. So what was it like growing up? Where'd you grow up, and what'd you want to be?
Yeah. So I was born out in California.
Okay.
My parents went to Berkeley, but we're not hippies. My dad went to business school there back in the 60s. So so I was born out there, moved to Massachusetts, Boston area, when I was 11. And you know, uh, I wanted to be a dermatologist growing up.
No way. Really?
Yes, I did. So my grandfather was a dermatologist, but I thought it was
Well,
cool.
I mean, whatever grandfather did. I mean, grandfather's cool as hell. So I could see
Right, there
that
you
being the
go.
case. Yeah.
So there you go. But then I went to college and I basically flunked out of Bio 101 and decided maybe if I couldn't master bio, maybe not the right field for me.
Oh, that's
So
smart, right? But do you go to school intending like, well, I'll probably go into medicine and be a
yeah,
dermatologist?
pre-med. Yeah, I was pre-med. I wanted
Wow.
to be a doctor. And so so I decided that wasn't the best thing. I don't have a great I'm pretty good at synthesizing information, but not a great rote memory type of person. And so literally memorizing the biology book and like things that it was not for me.
Same.
I was losing
Yeah.
my hair back then, which you wouldn't
Can't tell.
think
You look like you
now.
got
There you go.
California hair.
I
Looks
know. There
good.
you go. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I could tell how much hair I was losing by looking at the pages of my biology book, and I could tell actually which pages I had studied the most. So,
Yes. Yes.
so not for me, not for me. So then I kind of pivoted to business a little bit. I got some internships. And when I graduated from college, I had actually gotten a consulting job and a small boutique consulting company in Connecticut that and it was 99, so I don't even know how they did it. It was like a great time. The comedy was booming, but they weren't doing very well.
Yeah.
And they called me 2 weeks before graduation and laid me off. So I got fired from my
Okay.
first job before I even started. So that was an
Jeez.
auspicious beginning
Like,
to
welcome
my
to real
career.
world, kid.
I know, right? There you go. Have a great graduation. So,
Jeez.
but it was the internet boom, the late stage of that first internet boom, and so I
Yeah.
decided to go work in an internet startup, which ended up being the best thing. So I got hired by the VP of sales, and we were like 16 employees at the time. And he said, we need a call center, we need some inbound support, and we need an inside sales team. And so go build it. And I was like, what?
Right out of college?
Right out of college. So I was like,
Wow.
what is that? So I was, like got, call centers for dummies book, like
Yeah.
trying to figure this stuff out. But that's like, I mean, and that's the great thing about, those types of jobs is, the startup job is that, if they see somebody who's willing to do something, has got some ability, they just like go figure it out. And he was an entrepreneur. He had built a company, Adopt a Highway. You've probably seen some of those signs. So he was an entrepreneur by trade that had been hired as the VP of sales at this company. And he was, very much into just roll up your sleeves and figure it out. So
Yeah.
that's what I did. I figured out how to build a call center, an inside sales team, and then I was also supporting the field sales efforts there. And we had built a large outside sales team across the United States. And this was like the dot-com boom, where we'd raised a lot of money for a company that really the fundamentals were not that great, and we had actually hired somebody in China back then and Latin America before we had really figured out the model in the United States. But one thing that did happen is that the inside sales team actually, even back then, outperformed the outside sales team. And so that was kind of a lesson for me. It was like really interesting. We could really
Interesting.
manage these folks. We didn't have all the technology we had. We were all in one place, but I was like, this is pretty cool. So that company ended up going out of business, and I went and worked for a more traditional marketing agency doing trademark licensing. And I ran the trademark licensing for the Ford Motor Company group. So all those little die-cast cars and shirts
Wow.
and all that type of stuff. That was the programs that I ran, which was interesting because it was like a brand marketing, consumer marketing, but also a sales aspect in that we were trying to sell the rights to a lot of different smaller vendors who
Cool.
wanted that. So it was an interesting experience. But I also realized that I didn't love, it was more corporate, even though it wasn't a huge company, and I just didn't love that. And so when I went back to business school, I really wanted to get either back into startup world or more start my own company. And so um, uh, I entered a business plan competition, and I didn't have an idea for a business, but I started thinking about it and trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And I started reading about the distributed call center model. So this was 15 years ago, and companies had already started having people work out of their home offices instead of a call center environment, but it was pretty early on.
Yeah.
And I said that's awesome. Like why the reason we've had centralized call centers and is because you couldn't have people working everywhere. And I love the model. And at the same time, at business school, a lot of my friends were in the military, and they had mentioned how a lot of their spouses had had trouble finding jobs because they move on average, every 3 years, they're moving from base
Yeah.
to base. And so unemployment rates amongst military spouses is much higher than the general population. And so I said, well, this is kind of cool. Why don't we build a distributed call center just staffed by military spouses? So that was the original concept.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so we started as Home Base USA. It was like a double entendre, and got some support from Wharton and a little bit of seed funding, and
Oh,
decided
cool.
to launch it. And what we found, so first I pivoted to the outside sales. The first gig I got was from my first VP of sales who owned Adopt a Highway, and we were doing outbound prospecting for his company. And so I said, why don't we just focus on doing outbound sales? And I went from base to base recruiting different military spouses. But within a few months, we were getting a tremendous number of applications from very well qualified salespeople that weren't military spouses, but they just either didn't want to travel anymore and carry a bag, or they lived in a place where there weren't as many opportunities. And they wanted to work, or they just had home commitments and they wanted to be able to work from home. And so we're like, well, why not just open it to the best salespeople that we can find and just recruit them all over the country? And so that's what we did, and we rebranded to SalesRoads, and that's how we started the company.
That's a cool story. I can imagine being like, oh, this is great. We're gonna get all these military spouses, and all these other people like, what about we want in too? And you're like, but my branding is all about
Right.
gosh, what am I gonna do?
Yeah. I mean, we were all about the military on our website, everything, and people were
Yeah.
still applying because, there weren't very many opportunities back then
Right.
for virtual work. So when we were one of the few reputable places where people could find a real meaningful job.
Right. Man. Crazy. So now at this point, your team, like you're like the outsourced provider for those of like inside sales teams, or
Yeah. So what we do is, so our clients who are looking to outsource or to generate more appointments and opportunities for their salespeople, their AEs, they will outsource the top of the funnel sales development work to us. So instead of hiring a team of SDRs or BDRs and managing them internally, we do all of that work for them. So we have a team of SDRs who have a tremendous amount of experience in prospecting and cold calling. And then we become basically their outsourced SDR team. And we have all the coaching methodologies and systems set up. And so that way they don't have to worry about managing and generating enough opportunities for their AEs. They can just make sure that they're working on managing their AEs and making sure they're closing and bringing those opportunities through their funnel.
Gotcha. Hypothetical for you. Hypothetical question. I might have a time machine. I know you've been in this area, but it's in Nashua, New Hampshire, and it's in the back
Mm-hmm.
covered with a tarp. But after COVID, you come over, you get a chance to use the time machine. You go back in time and you meet yourself right after graduation, undergrad. You got fired just recently, and you haven't even started the job yet, or laid off, and you get to talk to that version of you. What kind of advice would you give that person, knowing all the things you know and the companies that you started and all the different experiences you've had, what would you tell you?
Yeah. So to start earlier, I think I loved working at the internet startup. I think that the next company I worked at, though, it was interesting to do licensing and things like that. Um, you know, I feel like it not wasted 2 years, but I just didn't learn as much. And those years as a 20-year-old, you can just learn so much. And so I think I was the type of kid, even going back even further, that even when I wanted to be, it's interesting. I never really put it, even though I wanted to be a dermatologist, I was always thinking of different business ideas, like, and they're hokey or whatever, but like, in my town in Massachusetts, there was one bagel shop and everybody would go to get bagels every Sunday. And I was like, why not create a bagel delivery service, right? Bagel
Yeah.
Express or whatever, and I was like, this is cool. And I'd think about it and think about it, but then I'd never do it. Right.
Right.
And I feel like, I should have just done it, obviously.
Yeah.
And who cares if it worked or not, right? It's just such a fun experience and you learn so much. And you hear like all these great, I was listening to a podcast with Mark Benioff, the founder of
Yeah.
Salesforce, I mean, all these founders like him, they had all these little businesses when they were young and whatever it was, they were always finding ways to, it wasn't about necessarily, it was fun to make money, but just to create things and do things. And I
Yes.
always was the type, until I started SalesRoads or Homebase, that I would be the person who was always thinking about the idea, but just never doing it.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important, and I was afraid of failing or not, not succeeding or spending time and not doing it. But it's like, I think, it's a little cliche, but it's just so true to just go out and just do it and try these different things. And I'll be honest, because of that roadblock, it was maybe a coin flip whether I actually started my own company or whether I went and worked for someone after business school, because I'm not really the risk taker. I'm not the person who just throws caution to the
Sure.
wind. And I said to myself, in that moment when I was making that decision, I was like, if you really want to be an entrepreneur, you can make a decision right now and you get to be an entrepreneur,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
if you don't make that decision, you're not an entrepreneur. So literally, who are you, David?
Right.
Right? Who are you? And I was like, you know what? I just got, I want to be who I want to be, even if it scares the shit out of me, and so I think that advice and doing it earlier, and also tasting, failure earlier, so that you really know it just doesn't matter. And you actually learn a lot more through those failures. So I know that's a bit cliche, but I feel it so it rings so true. And I wish I had just started earlier.
Yeah. No, and usually the cliche stuff is actually true. And it's just bad marketing for the true stuff.
Right.
Because it's usually the right stuff. And oh, that's cliche, but you should probably listen to
You're
it.
right.
It's so weird with that. Now, what's interesting now that I've had that mentality, anytime I hear someone say it's probably cliche or whatnot, I pay attention now, because
Right. That's true. That's a good
right,
point.
because it's like it's one of those like universal truths we should
That's true.
pay attention
Hey,
to.
that should be a good book. All of the cliches, like the 100 best cliches.
The best cliche wisdom, but the
Right.
problem is even the word cliche
Right, as a
is
turnoff.
like, so have to be something around like the wisdom that
The cachet of the cliche.
cachet. Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. I like that. It's good. Good. We'll have to work on this
All
together.
right, there we go. We got a project.
And to your point, we need to start. We can't just
Right, there we go.
have ideas and then somebody else comes out with a book because they listen to podcasts and they were like,
Right.
"Duh, we thought of doing that." I did
Right.
Uber, by the way. I'm a friend of mine and I were like, we should make an app on the cell phone that, early iPhone, that calls a cab for you. Like, that's a great idea. Yeah. We chat about it and we got stuck on what should we call it, and then we just never really did anything with it. And then some dummy comes up with Uber, which is not
I
even
know,
a
right?
word.
And that wasn't even their first name. They had a terrible name, so you guys could have started with a terrible name. I'm trying to
Should
remember
have started with a terrible name.
they did, and then you could have changed it.
Yellow phone app would have been fine.
There you go, as long as you were
Fine.
going.
So now when that stuff bonks you, like, oh, wait, never again, Uber, never again.
Right.
Well, I was listening to I don't remember who it was, but someone, Peter, is it Thiel,
From PayPal.
investor?
Yeah, a Facebook investor, PayPal,
Yeah,
started
yeah.
PayPal.
He had come to someone and he said, like, quit your job, I'll pay you. I gotta look up who this person is, but quit your job, I'll pay you your whole year's salary right now. And
Yeah,
his response was, because he's working at Microsoft. And he was working at he said, well, no, I want to stay at Microsoft so that I get um level 7 on the next
certification or
thing.
whatever.
No, level 7. I'm about to get a raise, I think, and I need.
Right, that
Meanwhile,
corporate
you
thing.
have this
Yeah,
guy over here saying, "I'll pay you the whole salary right now. Come on, let's go." Like,
yeah,
no, and he was like, "That cost," and he eventually joined later on, but it cost him. He said it cost him $200 million
I'm
because
sure.
he had initial equity. I wonder about that. HubSpot asked me a long time ago. They're like, "I know you just started this job, but why don't you come over here to the dark side, the orange side?" And I said, "No, no, I just started this job over here. I want to stay here." Knowing what I know about HubSpot, I'm kind of biased now toward Pardot, so this maybe never would have happened. This whole
They got all worked out.
You never know.
Uh,
But
well, when I
go
go
ahead.
ahead, Casey.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, so I mean, when I was living in California, my dad was a lawyer, and he got an interview at a little fruit company back in the day, and came back and said these guys they have computers on all their desks and
Wow.
whatnot, and I mean he knew who Apple was at that point, but he didn't, so he interviewed at Apple early on, and wasn't sure if it was it was a little maybe too risky of a bet for him. So
Ah.
he would have still had to ride it for
It would
dust
have,
to
but
death. But
even the stock alone, right? It's
I
like you
know,
go
right?
back in time. Here's all this good advice. Start sooner. Oh, and buy Apple.
Right.
Or when you hear this company called Tesla, just go ahead and buy it.
Right. There you go.
Don't listen to the news. Yeah.
Right.
Oh, that's crazy. But you mentioned the risk taking, and you're not necessarily a risk taker, but I know that you're into like piano and like jazz piano, is it? And that seems like that's just the ultimate risk taking and just like going off on a riff and just making shit up and being okay with whatever happens. I mean, tell me about that. Have you always been musical?
So I've always been interested in music, and I come from a pretty musical family. My dad was a musician. My brother was a musician. He actually had
Jeez.
like a record deal. So I come from that stock, and I've got a little bit myself, but I've never really like gone out and performed and whatnot. And so I would
Sure.
actually say that maybe feeds into my non-risk taking, because
Interesting,
I
man.
mainly
Yeah.
am playing for myself or at home. And one of the things actually I played a lot more in high school, but had kind of not given it up, but hadn't really been doing very much over the past 13, 15 years even. And it's actually the pandemic where I came back to it, and I went and got a keyboard out of my mom's garage, one of my brother's old keyboards, and brought it in and just
Yeah.
started riffing again, and it's been
Jeez.
awesome.
That's cool. Just a way to express yourself, and but tell me about what's different
Yeah,
from jazz piano over like regular piano.
yeah.
What makes,
So
yeah, what's the difference?
so I guess maybe more like classical, or just well, the big thing for jazz that I love is just the improvisation side of
Yeah.
it, and I feel like I can be more creative and expressive, and I love just being able to like take a tune with a few chords and just hammer it out, and just you know try to be a little crazy with it and do some things that are a little different, and sometimes it really sounds awful and sometimes like, wow, that was kind of cool. So I like that little improvisation aspect of it. And going back to my rote memory thing, it's really hard for me to memorize or learn a whole long song, a long classical music song. I like classical music too, but whereas with jazz I can just remember a few chords and just play for a long period of time and just do my thing.
Wow. I think it's a good point too, that sometimes it's terrible, right? But you're trying stuff,
Hmm.
and I think
Absolutely.
in TV shows and movies and recordings, you have these, the famous greats, playing something, but that's because they've messed up and played the wrong thing 30 million times, but they just keep going with it and they just never stopped. And so naturally, what not to maybe riff on next or what notes not to play. And so you can
Yeah.
give yourself more of an alleyway.
Yeah, or going with that, sometimes you can take a note that just sounds really wrong and then sort of play around it and make it sound like you kind of intended to do it. It's kind of fun.
Really?
You can do it and then you kind of like play with it. And if you really do it right, it can like seem like you were just kind of like doing something a little different and then you make it fit together. So, and you got to just keep rolling with it, right? If you're actually performing it.
Wow. Sounds
So
like
it's fun.
entrepreneurship.
It is. It is kind of right.
Is that your next book? Is that going to be on
Uh,
entrepreneurships and jazz piano?
After we finish our cliche book, sure.
Yeah, the jazz piano founder right there.
There you go. Right.
After the cliche book? Okay.
Yeah.
So we got that one first. I have to start going to collect the cliches up. Clichecache.com.
There we go. Or .ai now, and then maybe the algorithm will learn what the next cliche is, and it will just keep on generating them for us.
And then we're doomed. Because it'll take over the planet with our.
There you go.
It'll know our cliches and yeah, we're sold. Hey, this has been great. Where can people connect with you if they want to reach out, either get help with their sales or just connect with you? What are some great places for that?
Yeah, so LinkedIn, I'm active on LinkedIn. So if you hit me up on LinkedIn and just connect with me, shoot me a question or just a hi. It's a great, it's great medium for that. So, and then, our website's salesroads.com. So you can always look us up there and call us that way. And, just love to hear from folks and any questions people have or ideas. I know a lot of your listeners are marketing folks. So, any ideas of, things that you agree with or disagree with, it's always great to hear from folks and just talk about it.
Yeah. Awesome, man. Well, we'll put links in the show notes to that. That's been great, man. Thanks for coming on here and just hanging out with me and chatting sales and piano and all that good stuff.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me on, Casey. It was fun. We'll have to get on that book before somebody steals it from us.
Yeah, before we put this episode live, right? We gotta get to work. Clear your schedule.
There we go.
Well, for those people listening, if you learned something, and I freaking know you did, because I have 2 pages of notes over here, front and back, then share this episode with someone. Be a thought leader. And that's the way you do that is you hop on LinkedIn and you put your takeaways on there, link to the episode in the comments, and then tag myself, tag David, and we'll start a conversation with you on there. And that is how you share this information. That's how you become a thought leader yourself, just by listening and sharing the things you're hearing. So good stuff. David, you're the man. Let's stay in touch. We'll have you come back on here after we publish our book together, and I'll go from there.
Sounds great. Thanks so much.
Take care, man. For those people listening, this has been the Hardcore Marketing Show. We will catch you all next time.